Welcome to the DevReady Podcast. On today's episode of the DevReady Podcast, I have Steven Whittington joining me. Thanks for joining me, Steven.
Thanks, Anthony. It's great to be here.
Well, I'll let you introduce yourself because I seem to do a terrible job at these, so I'll let you take it away.
Thanks for that. I guess I'm here as the founder and CEO of a product called My Health Match, which is a patient engagement platform in the allied health and all the health industry at large. But more recently, it's grown to be focused on interoperability, data migration, and data standards in the health sector. Apart from that, I work as a fractional operations manager, director in a number of health organizations and coached health organizations over the year, and I work with practice management software as a product owner and a startup founder in a number of health, both clinics and tech software organizations over the last 15 to 20 years.
Okay, it's quite varied, but a definite focus there on the health. How did you get into that space, into the health tech space, really? What was the start of your journey?
The start of my journey in the health tech space was, I guess it came down to I was fortunate as a young cadet manager some 35 years ago to work with a vice president of the company who asked me to set up a 50-year plan. And about the 30 years into that plan, there was a review phase where I looked at what are the two biggest emerging industries in the next 20 years, and that was in the mid noughties, so 2005-ish. And at that time, the number one and two were health and cloud computing. So I decided to learn everything I could about both, and ended up in a role with a psychology practice. And they were expanding, and I got involved with that. And I came against the problem of, at the time they were booking people in, it was a very manual process. I saw it as a big block to how we grow the business. Decided to go out and find software because surely somebody's done this before. They hadn't. Started working with Salesforce, who were preeminent at that time around cloud computing. Basically, long story short, in 6 weeks, we took a business from 40 people, 40 practitioners and 20 admin staff, and grew that to nearly 1,000 practitioners in 900 locations. Wrote some software that shortened a process of onboarding from 25 minutes to 3, increased attendance at first session, and I was hooked. From that moment on, I was just like, well, how can we do this with everything and do it in the cloud? And back in 2009, moving health data into the cloud, we were considered heretics, and we had all of the incumbent industry going on about data security and privacy and et cetera, which was, my counter argument was all the health data currently is in a box sitting under the desk in reception, and our data is in a data center with armed guards and redundancy programs. How is it less risky or more risky against our strategy? But fast forward, I worked through that. I left a clinic, sold that solution, went and worked for a practice management software provider, learned about cloud and agile and Scrum Master, and did all that training, become product owner, become chief product owner, and then started working with government around interoperability, messaging, movement back, data conformance, and got hooked on what would be the future and what are the barriers to interoperability.
Okay, so yeah, you're very early there on cloud and stuff at that point in time, and having a 50-year plan is something I've never heard of. People struggle to know what they're doing for the next 3 months, let alone 3 years or 5, let alone 50. So that really did set you on a path to what was emerging and being there. But I think just in what you said there, it's you were being a heretic then and having a lot of incumbents around that didn't push things to the cloud. You've probably still got that in place in the industry a lot at the moment, but there's a lot more inroads being made to cloud software or just software in general. I know they still use faxes in pharmacy and doctors.
It's actually been, they legislated against the fax in 2012, but it hasn't stopped the use of the fax.
Oh, wow, really?
In industry. So that was one of the earlier projects that was run by NITA, which is the predecessor of the Australian Digital Health Agency. Look, there was a lot of pushback on cloud up to about 2018, 2019. For all of the terrible things that happened through the pandemic, one of the things that did happen was that the resistance to digital and cloud was weakened because there wasn't the choice of doing physical installations or going on and doing those types of things. So cloud and interoperability got accelerated out of real need. And it wasn't until I've been, attending at the Digital Health Fest here in Australia and it wasn't until 2 years ago that it sort of started to feel like interoperability was at the point as a turning point, and then this year's event really it was at the forefront, particularly with data standards like FHIR, and vendors talking about, well, and also the big four in the hospital sector, CEOs live on stage. You could have knocked me over with a feather when they said that their focus at the moment is about being able to share a patient record between themselves and their competition so that the patient was enabled to have that record and have it shareable, not have a barrier in there of interoperability between those systems. So I think we've really broken the back of the objections of everybody trying to build a silo. And I think anybody on that trajectory or currently running within a data silo saying it's my data, they've got to be my users, is in a losing case now.
I think that's definitely the case, especially in like the medical space, because it's not your data, it's the patient's data, and the patient needs that to go with them, regardless of which provider they go to, wherever they are, so then they can get the best care possible. Because at the moment, yeah, well, the way it used to be is, yeah, you'd have to change doctors, all right, and get them to send the manila folder from one doctor to the other doctor, and hopefully it's the right one. Papers haven't fallen out, and it's just there's no history there. But yeah, now with the practice management software, and then I'm guessing with the integration or probably enablement of the My Health record, that's probably helped a lot.
Yeah, it has and it hasn't, because the My Health record's still in a legacy standard, the HL7
Okay.
standard. It's about to be upgraded to FHIR. I think the challenge we have in here, and hospitals a bit better, GP specialists are a little bit better, but in the allied health space, I'd say that predominantly 80 or 90% of those practice management software really started in someone's bedroom in 2009 as an SQL database from AWS, and then it's sort of just built from there. And one of the learnings was when GDPR came in Europe, sort of in the late teens, so 17, 18, 19, a lot of those systems struggled to be compliant around the privacy requirements because they were built on queries that looked at three data points, first name, last name, and phone number or email address. And when they weren't allowed to use those under GDPR, and they hadn't written tables, SQL tables with references in there to be able to join that data together, they started really crashing. So it really took the industry 2 years. There was almost no innovation. That was just trying to conform to the standard to get back to where they were. And now they're facing a similar thing going ahead with FHIR in terms of the transportability of health data through this standard, Australian created standard called FHIR. And there's a initiative with the CSIRO at the moment called the Spark program, which is about developing an Australian standard under FHIR for sharing that information. You talked about the facts just before. Currently, crazily enough, between two medical systems in the GP space, a document might be written and wrapped in one system that gets sent to an intermediary system that unpacks it, looks at it, and goes, "Oh, where's it going to?" And I'll reformat it in their standard. And it goes to
Mm-hmm.
another intermediary and gets unpacked and reformatted. Then it goes to the final PMS system that may or may not have all of the fields in there. So what you end up with is a
Yep.
PDF and some of the fields put into the database. Under FHIR, all the intermediaries disappear, and you get one for one like for like data transmitted across it. So we're close. I mean, America legislated this in 2018. Apple's picked it up. The EU's picked it up. Australia, even though it's an Australian standard, is still talking about adopting it.
It seems, yeah, the whole medical space is a little bit slower to adopt the technology, especially newer technology like cloud software and database and being able to share information across. While they may pick up maybe the machinery or medical equipment faster because it actually helps on the diagnosis side, they still have a lot of caution towards the patient data. Is sort of my impression of the industry.
Yeah, there's a lot of legacy reasons for that. And you mentioned technology. Like in the dental space, is very hard to break into at the moment because all of the equipment isn't cloud-based. It's not digital. It requires on cables joining it up to a server that's on site. So often the cost, the barrier there is you go to a dentist and say, we can modernize your whole system, and the software is in the cloud, so it's very affordable. And they go, yeah, but I got to replace $1 million worth of hardware. That's sort of, and nothing's wrong with it. So when it breaks or I open a new clinic, then I'll start with that. And the same sort of stuff with hospital. And I think rightly so, they move slowly because, the They move slowly because it's proven, and there's too many barriers to implementation if it goes wrong. So, you've got to look for new opportunities in this space, but you've also got to be very cognizant about health practitioners are time poor, the time to learn something new if it's not intuitive, or to trust that it'll work, is a barrier. So there's lots of great tech sitting out there that would do an amazing job and would save money and save time that's not being utilized because it never integrated into the workflow of the people it was intended for.
Yeah, and that's a key problem with your background saying product owner, product manager. You'll understand not talking to enough stakeholders and not understanding the impact on workflow, and then culture and change management is a big problem, especially when you're trying to push something new to an organization or an industry, especially because it's not like you mentioned. It's not just being able to deliver something and using it. If there's existing hardware, they're not going to throw that out if there has no problem, as you mentioned, because why would they just waste that money? The time to train, time to learn, the benefit they're going to get from it, they may not see any tangible benefit either. It might be the same value, but it might be more reliable potentially, or in uptime or whatever that may be, which is a non-tangible thing that they don't really see day to day.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, and particularly as a product owner working with a marketplace or an API, exposed API, the number of startups that I met with over the years, and now I'm actively meeting with startups, hopefully before they get to this stage. They would come to the PMS and say, you got an API, but it doesn't give me access to all the clients, and you'd say, what do you want to do with it? Oh, well, what I want to do is connect and pull all the patient data from your clinical systems across all of the accounts, and then I want to do basically a booking app. And I'm like, so we've got a client portal inside the practice management software that the clinics connect into. So how would yours be different? It wouldn't be different, but just be cheaper. So when can I get access to the data? And it's like, we've got a business model that's been going for like 15 years. We built up all of that. And as a developer, you're just thinking, just connect up and give me all those clients and I'll go and market them something cheaper that you're already offering them. So where's the value add in that? Where's the part that you're doing something or solving a problem, not just riding on the back of someone else? Or for example, a clinician who's got a great clinical solution has gone and found their second cousin who's a web developer, and they connect to you and say, yeah, I want to connect to your API, and you ask them how they're doing it, and they go, great, I've just taken the documentation, I've got a web page, and it's going to call the data. So they're putting all the API information into the web page, and they call it out because they don't understand how health, privacy, and security is. They don't understand you don't have the same protections under privacy of data when it comes to health that you do under business. There are no thresholds. If you have one client's data in there, and the Australian Securities Commission, on a webinar I was on back in 2017, 2018, expressed concern that a pixel's worth of data on a screen overseas would be a violation of the Privacy Act. So, so the hosting, and when you ask marketplace add-ons, where are you hosting? Oh, I'm hosting in such and such country. I'm a web developer. I'm putting it on the internet. It's just like, sorry guys, you need to go back and get some industry knowledge before you can come in here and connect. But we also know there's a lot of vendors out there who just have an open API and they don't do that qualification. So it's a tricky space.
It definitely is, especially the web developers, as you term them, which are more like web designers, people who build websites, who can code a little bit, not actual programmers who understand how to organize data structures and how to hide API calls onto your server. So not really hiding. They should be triggered from the server, so they're never accessible on the front end, and keys are not exposed. And there's a lot of layers there that you need to take care of, which a web developer can't normally do.
Correct. And we see that in inexperienced clinicians who want to build a tech product, and they go to a family member and they start out building it. And where I work a lot today with startups is like, think past the first 2 years, because whatever clinical solution you've got will be great. You'll test it with your peers and they'll love it, and your family will love it. Maybe your local PHN will get behind you because you've got credibility in that market. Year 2, when you get to actually get past this is working and now I want to grow it, you hit the barrier of going to professionals you don't know who maybe use a different clinical system or a different workflow, and they'll be saying, look, I love it. I think it'll be great. All I want to do is click a button in my existing workflow and have that happen. And then they go, oh, well, now I've got to connect to that system and the next system and the next system and the next system. They spend the years 2, 3, 4, and 5 just building integrations, the same integrations that every other startup has had to build into their. And through My Health Match and my product, what we're offering is a single point of entry, FHIR enabled, connect to legacy APIs to protect those startups from having to do that and just pay for the service of the connectability rather than for having to build 15 different integrations and then support them and then manage through the change. And in the next few years, then change from JSON to Fire-enabled endpoints, etc., and then doing that and enable it to work with a product that provides that interoperability as a service.
Yeah, and that's probably a word of caution there for any startup, not just in the health tech. It's as soon as you have to start integrating with different platforms based on what the clients are existing clients are using, you then have to be careful with how many you build and how far you're going to go. And then, all right, from experience, you don't build an integration for one customer unless that is the only customer you have. And you're looking to buy or be absorbed or them buying you. Like, the integrations can never end. And there are other tools out there that can do integrations, and you've got easier things like NAN or Zapier and Make.com, which can do some sort of automation through a no-code interface. You lose a lot of control by doing that. So you may want to, depending on what sort of product you have and don't want data going overseas, then you have to build an integration yourself. But that is a never-ending whack-a-mole.
That connecting in, I think at the beginning, a lot of clinicians or a lot of health tech startups look for what's the fastest way I can get live, and the developer will say, hey, well, we can hard code this, or we can build it. There's a quicker way to build it, and what that means is as soon as you get adoption, then it can't scale, and then they have to go back to the drawing board, or all they're doing is kicking that cost a little bit down the line, probably still when they still can't afford it. But now it's critical because they've got 1 foot in the market with live customers and a solution that won't scale. So, as a health tech startup myself, taking the long, painful road of doing it right and investing in beta versions and scale up and the shift. One of the great things, as we all know about tech these days, is what I was trying to do 5 years ago was now nigh on impossible, or needed a billionaire sort of plaything to get it up and running. And now you can do it quite affordably. And low codes, for me, has been one of the great the great savers in terms of scalability. Obviously it's got an entry barrier in terms of the environment that you need to get into it, but that scale is infinite on the other side of it. So, whenever we've been up against a problem that looks insurmountable, generally 6 months later, somebody at the big end of town's launched a startup friendly version of that, or they've solved the problem at the big end that you can leverage against.
Sometimes your MVP or your first version that you release to the market is not what you're going to end up with anyway. They do say your first version you should be embarrassed by. But a lot of founders don't realize that the first thing you release is just a version 1, and then the version 2 is what you really wanted to build.
Yes.
But they're not aware that they have to scrap it to get to that. They keep trying to build on top of that flimsy house of cards. Yes. Where I think a lot of people in the tech space, not even just the tech space, ones that have been in the space long enough and understand and observe what's happening, your first version is just to get you there and prove the point and make sure you've got some product market fit. And then you really need to scrap it and start again with what you actually wanted to build now that you've got the learnings in place.
Absolutely. But yeah, definitely. And often those MVPs in the health space will run without all of the compliance requirements in there, and probably in an environment that's not necessarily fit for it. So the trap can be an MVP for a retail solution. You can small scale it, come back a week later, and then roll out, and you're good to go. In health, getting connected to those various systems that enable the operability. Are you checking the practitioners, registration, compliance? All of those things. Are you looking for services perhaps that were running inside your environment that are actually third-party apps that are non-conformant, and therefore, how do you advise your clients that you're compliant or not compliant in those areas, in an ever-changing area? And then I guess for those that cross over, and I tend to avoid this space very much, is in terms of trying to stay away from the therapeutic goods and associations with it, whether it becomes a medical product where it's recommending, if it's software and it's making a recommendation, or if it's hardware and it's actually a medical device, knowing where the edge of that realm is, that you're not going to find yourself in a regulatory nightmare that's going to last for years just because you ventured or didn't think about maybe a limitation that would keep you out of that space.
Yeah, and that's a huge risk there for anyone in that space, is understand what you're actually trying to do versus what the regulations say. And that's just for any industry, not just the health, but it's more prominent, I think, in the health industry, simply because of the potential risks, and especially if you're recommending things and didn't realize the way you should be recommending and have all the proof and evidence behind the logic that's gone into the algorithm or their hardware to actually get to that point.
Yeah. And you see a lot of effort goes into solutions that, as a customer, people will go, "There's a better way to do this," but they don't actually engage with industry to understand why industry is locked into particular ways of doing things. So, it comes back to that market fit and customer research in the beginning is, don't be a frustrated customer building a solution for customers without consulting with industry, or at least getting their side of it first, because you can go a long way down a rabbit hole trying to find a solution
You can.
that no one's interested in.
Yeah, it's the don't build it and they will come model.
No.
It doesn't work like that Field of Dreams movie. But it's also don't build what you think. You need to get feedback. You need to understand what people actually want. And if you're in the space and you're solving a problem for yourself, then you're more than likely going to solve a problem for other people in the same space. So you're in one step ahead. It's very different being an outsider going in and thinking you're solving a problem as an end customer of the client. It's
Yeah.
very different.
Yeah. I think, and the other side of the factor is, offering a SaaS product in this space for as many years as we have. You see the clients who are like, this isn't perfect for what I want. It needs to change. And it's like, it's often that 2%. And at the end of the day, that 2%, I go, to most customers, happy to build what you want. You're currently subscribing for $45 a month. To build what you want would be $100,000. When will the money hit the bank? And they're like, what do you mean $100,000? It's $45. I just want you to change these things. It's like you fundamentally want to change the way the product works because it doesn't do one small thing that you want it to do. So, and you're not willing to pay the gap, and we're not willing to spend the money and not get rewarded for it. So you have to compromise. These days people go, well, with me particularly, I have a preference for using single stacks for no other reason that they all work together. I'm leveraging on that. I go fast. Yes, so there are other features in other products that I would love to leverage, but the cost of the downtime of switching systems or being between the two of them sort of lives there. And so as long as I'm 95% happy with what I'm using, I'm good. But there's a lot of people out there that go down the road of trying to make 100% happy about everything for years, and there's a lot of expense in that, and probably not the outcome that they're looking for. So that customer that's like, it's not perfect yet, I won't use it, I want it to be like this, it's probably someone to walk away from pretty early in the process, going, they'll actually never be happy. They'll never find happiness in almost there.
Yeah. And that's a touching point, I think, for a lot of startups just building tech in general. It's anytime you start going down the customization route, you're now providing custom projects. You're not building a SaaS platform that can suit the mass market. So there is going to be a cost, and there will be 6 to 12 month lead time to build out that feature. And unless you're going to sell that feature and integrate it into your platform because it's a good feature that the rest of the people will use, it's really not worth building. And then you're touching on that point about perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. And there's a lot of developers online that have the mantra, close enough is good enough. And that's generally what it is with software, because everyone has an opinion.
Yeah, I have a sign right in front of me on the wall in big letters that says "Perfect is the enemy of good, and good is enough."
Yep.
Because that last 2% push or 5% push is going to take 80% of the time. Parato's rule kicks in on that one. So good, and get it into market, and then come back and then make it good again, and just keep iterating through different versions of good, and you'll get there, because you'll also create an audience size big enough that one single voice that's yelling for something will get drowned out by everyone else saying, no, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, that's that vocal minority that you have to be aware of. There's the silent majority and the vocal minority. Yeah, it's understand what you're actually trying to build and the value you're trying to provide to your customers, not just take everything that one of them says. Well, you do need to listen to feedback. You don't want to just take on everything that everyone says and build everything they're asking.
Yeah, I think that really comes down to, in the early stages, products I built probably 6 to 9 months of work before we even drop a line of code, which is who's the core customer, what's the product, what's the problem that we're solving. And then it makes it easier that someone comes along and says, hey, I'll give you $50,000 to go build this feature in your product. And then we always go back and look at the fit and go, hang on, not the core customer, not what the product was, it doesn't address the problem, blah, blah, blah. So it doesn't mean that we say no to the opportunity. We just say not with this product and not with this team, but it's a great opportunity. Therefore, the startup cost on that is X. Your 50 is not going to cover it. What do you want to do about it? And then walk away from it. Stay focused on what we were setting out to do, because you can get partially launched and then running around building a whole bunch of features for individuals on the promise that it'll be a great thing. And then 3 years later, you go, hang on, there's 10 competitors in this space now that just did what we started out with, and we haven't yet done that because we've been too busy trying to build this, for the noisy ones. And I think that power of no, or not now, is the hardest thing to keep the focus on in any sort of startup environment.
Yeah, definitely. And then what you're doing is you're building all these features that aren't working for anyone. It's not the one good feature that you're initially planning and trying to actually build out properly. So what you said there on spending 6 to 9 months planning first is what the whole philosophy behind what we do is DevReady, and the whole name and philosophy behind the whole podcast. It's a lot easier to change words on the page than it is to go back and change code, especially once it's deployed and having to re-architect things. You're more than happy to spend $2,000 to save 200
Absolutely.
in this space, because you might have to rebuild and re-architect things if you wouldn't plan it quick right in the first place. I always go back to the house analogies. You want a triple story house? Build the foundations for a triple story house. You can start with a 1-bedroom shack on that slab or whatever foundations you have, but then you can expand it. If you don't build it with that, you can't get to that point unless you tear it down and start again. So there's a huge cost there that you can avoid, and avoid going into the known risk, which is the problem that most people, it is a known risk. Like, if you're not planning, you're failing.
Yeah, and that initial specification, if you're building a shack, that means that, dirt foundations or compressed earth foundations will be enough. But if you've got the risk of maybe wanting to build triple story on it, then dig deeper and put in a solid foundation. And the analogy for that really is in data standards. If you're looking for a use case where your app or your solution is going to end up in hospitals, GPs, and allied health, and collaborative workforces, you got to start with the data standard. So, your first protocol has got to be looking at one of those environments that you can spin up, or do you build your own for that, for use purposes, who your core customer is going to be? Because whether it's in health or any other industry, you can get really you can get really snowed under with all of the different problems and features and users and user types and customer profiles. If you've gone into it, well, I think I want to work in this industry and build something, as opposed to going in, I want to solve this niche problem, and I know exactly what it's for and how it works, and build a base in that as a toehold, as you say, to keep building those extensions and next level off that solid foundation.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if it's just because of naivety or what you don't know, but a lot of startups do just jump in and avoid all of that. And then they're the ones that we end up calling our rescue projects. They've either gone overseas on the cheapest dollar, or they've gone to another provider. They've gone to a web developer who doesn't know how to build an actual app, and has just done something, or the team's just dived into code before because they don't have that philosophy of plan first and then understand what you're doing. It's really a shame to see it when it happens, because it's only if only they knew what you're telling everyone before they hand. Like, you know the pain you could have saved them, and I'm sure you've got that with the startups you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly the non-technical founders that are in there going, if these guys can do it for $30,000, why is there a $190,000 quote? And it's, it comes back to.
I can tell you straight away why that difference is there.
Absolutely, everybody does, but the temptation is, well, I'll get it live and then I'll fix it up. But you're really doing damage to yourself. You're not doing service to the idea or and if you can't get that structure right, I think there's as much investment into the foundation of the idea and documenting that process and how it would grow and what targets there is to scoping out for the product and being aware of what you don't know as a non-tech founder. While I don't write code, I understand how to write user stories and the such. But being able to go, well, this is the outcome that I'm looking for, and leave it to the technical team to come back with how they're going to do it, because I'm not invested in the how. apart from probably after 20 years, I know a lot about the house. So I am interested in what they tell me, but at the same time, I don't want to tell a developer how to suck eggs and how it should write code and what platform they should use and what data standard. And I say as long as it conforms with this standard and it scales to that level, then build it. But don't come back to me next week and say, oh, we didn't anticipate that we'd have 10,000 new users in a month. It was in the document. So that was part of the scope. End of story.
Yep.
And know that.
And it's an interesting place those non-technical founders come in from. And then, like, if you're advising, at least they've got you on their side to help validate or verify or pull out the red flags that another group is coming towards them with. A lot of the times they're on their own. They've gone to another agency and they may get along with the person they're talking to, and then, all right, yep, you seem like you're going to do a good job, and then they don't, because the person you're talking to just says yes to everything, or they're just a good salesman. So it's really an interesting position to be, that non-tech founder who doesn't have the support or backup of a technical person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be challenging, but think about all the other things we do. We build houses, we buy houses, we trust lawyers and accountants, and the other side, I think, tech's a bit of a wild west because there's a million ways to do anything. But as it's emerging, I've been around since people were writing in DOS, so that sort of dates me a little bit. But what I'm seeing is that particularly with AI and low code solutions and build a block and that we should be getting over the next 10 to 15 years away from sitting down with a screen and writing code, as opposed to reusable components and working with data standards and being able to plug and play. So there should be at least a safety net in there, but also the industry is becoming more compliant in terms of interoperability is a bigger thing now. It used to be good enough to build a stack and build a silo, and have everybody use your application, and it didn't really care about what it is. But no, nowadays, whether it's a TV or a phone or an air conditioner or a fan or even a light bulb, that it is going to be connected in some way down the track. So I think standards are really going to be the thing that creates a level playing field there, and perhaps we'll cut out some of that. I'll build it for 10 grand. When you really know it's $1 million application that you need. 10 grand might just be a proof of concept, but people legitimately think as founders that's it. I've built the product now I'll go and sell it. It's like, well, yeah, for the first week maybe, but week 2 it's going to fall over.
Yep. Yeah, it's a big problem, that standards thing. Even like every language has standards on how things should be done, but there's no enforcement, there's no monitoring, there's nothing there. So that's why you do get a lot of the cowboys in that Wild West space, just being able to do stuff, take people's money, burn them, just say yes to everything. Or the people who are like, oh, it only cost me 30, and then they come back with a change request for 5 or 10. That's okay, because it's still cheap compared to the 190. I'm still under. Then over time, you've lost sleep, you've lost probably hair, and you've spent $300,000 now building it for 3 times over.
And more than likely burned a lot of customers along the way that got frustrated with a product that didn't deliver on the promises, or it was over-promised and under-deliver, or it couldn't scale, or it had redundancy, technical legacy built into it that they didn't account for. And that's, if you're not a tech founder, get good advice with third-party advisory, or go to other founders and say, what problems did you have in that? So it amazes me. You'll go to a lot of the health tech stuff and go down Digital Alley and be like, see similar products and talk to 2 founders and go, hey, have you spoken to the guy over there that's building something? No. And it's like, come with me. We'll go over and go, hey, this is John, this is Michael, you're building something similar. What problems have you had? What problems have you? It's like, if the market's not big enough to contemplate that there would be 2 options in there, and you guys can't work together on some common issues around what the industry faces, then you have no hope whatsoever of growing and scaling this thing within an industry. If you're going, I don't want to talk to them because they might find out something. It's like, come on.
You're never the only person.
They're so much further along that your idea is already there, or that you're compatible, or you get out of it, or at least you start forming some sort of collaboration around, hey, we're serving an industry and we're serving a customer, and if it's all about me and my data and my silo and my solution, and I have to be the one that wins this race, then you're never really going to win in the long term.
You're never the only one who's come up with an idea.
Absolutely. People say to me all the time, yeah, you're pretty open about what you're building and what the problem is and what the solution is and blah, blah, blah. What if somebody takes that and builds it? And I'll be like, I'd be the happiest man alive because these are big problems and they're facing millions of people. If somebody's got the money to build this faster than I have and they do a good job of it, I'll just move on to the next problem because there's plenty of problems to solve.
And also, yeah, it's like good luck to them because the time and the money it takes to do that, it's not something you can do overnight either. Especially if you've got years of head start either as well.
Yeah. And I would happily, I talk to lots of people in the space, direct competitors all the time. And well, the challenge is regulatory changes. Did you see this one coming up? Or, because you never know down the track. Well, I'm talking about interoperability. I'm passionate about interoperability. I'm passionate about open platform. I'm passionate about patients owning their own data and data being able to move through the industry. It would be quite disingenuous of me to then go, but only I can do it, and only our product, and not go.
It's not very interoperable, is it?
It's not very interoperability. Yeah.
So, just before we wrap up, for any of those startups that you've been looking that thinking about talking to you, or someone that's doing stuff but hasn't known about what you're capable of yet, what are some sort of what's some key piece of advice you can give anyone who's the non-technical person that's looking to just jump into the health space?
If you're looking at the health space and you're non-technical, if you're a clinician and you don't have tech in there, is go find a third-party tech person, even if they're not the one building it that's been in this space before, and ask them for some advice or direction in that. If you're technical and you don't have a clinical, if you don't have clinical contacts or you haven't been involved in the health space, you're not working in it, go find somebody in that space. Resist that temptation to get something out that's disconnected or you don't understand about the market, but do your research in there. There's plenty of great advice around how to, scope a product and build that now. So get into that, but then look for somebody who's built. If it's your first time non-technical founder, look for an organization to build your tech that's worked with founders before and contact them to do due diligence. Did they build it for the current price they said? Is it scalable? Is it still operable? Where's it hosted? Who controls the hosting? All of those sorts of things that you may not think of. Go and do as much research. You can always build later, build right later rather than build wrong now.
Yep. And if anyone wants to reach out and find out more about yourself, Stephen, how can they do that?
Contact me. LinkedIn's probably the easiest way. I know you found me there. I'm on there,
Yep.
Steve Whittington LinkedIn, or My Health Match is the easiest way to contact me. Happy to have a chat with anybody about anything in the tech space, particularly in health and interoperability, and also work closely in the mental health space as well these days. So around those issues with founders as well.
All right, no problem. And we'll add those links to the show notes as well. And yeah, thanks for your time today, Steve. It's been a great chat. I didn't know where this was going to go and how technical you were, but I think we've kept it pretty top level for everyone to be able to understand and take some
Fantastic.
key learnings from this.
No, thanks for the opportunity. It's been great to have a chat with you, Anthony.
Thanks, Stephen.